Right now, the prices have been raising in Azerbaijan since COVID, have continued. Disinflation is not a theme. People in power are not probably harmed by the levels of inflation. They probably have enough to compensate. How do people underneath do it? And what are they losing with this? Well, they're losing the ability for somebody to represent their interest in saying, hey, we need to do something about the prices going up. We need to act on this. But they're also losing the social services that NGOs were providing. And we often think of NGOs always as being political only. They're not only political. I mean, it is maybe political to provide social services such as healthcare. Maybe it is political to provide shelter for women who suffer from domestic violence. But these are all services that will have disappeared, or when they're provided, are provided in a framework very controlled by the government. So this is something that people are losing. What are people losing? Well, when there's pollution happening, we now know Azerbaijan's government showed it very clearly in June 2023 with the Suyudlu protests. If you protest against a pollution that is affecting you, your health, your neighborhood, you will land up in prison and face, at best, drastic administrative charges with high fines. So people won't protest against pollution anymore. They got the message. And another thing that we haven't yet spoken about that is happening also is access to lawyers. Many people don't have the means to pay their lawyers, used to have legal services provided by civil society. With in Azerbaijan, like in the West, we don't know this, but in Azerbaijan, like in many post-Soviet republics, NGOs can represent people in court directly. This is gone, right? This is has basically disappeared in Azerbaijan. And so I really wonder now if you have a disagreement with the administration. Maybe it is about the payment of your taxes, where you feel like you have been taxed too much. If you have a disagreement with the administration, maybe it is because they want to build a new street in front of your house that will, cut your garden off. How do you do it now? Where do you go to represent your rights? And then last point I want to make about the people who are in the country. We are now, thanks to the Absas journalists who have been imprisoned, thanks to the Maidan TV journalists who have been imprisoned, we are now seeing what everybody knew, but nobody really spoke about it, which is the prison conditions in Azerbaijan, where you have prison conditions that are affecting now these political prisoners very badly with use of torture and ill treatment. We see it quasi on a daily basis with sexualized violence against women detainees. But this is only the visible part of the icebergs that your journalists are reporting on from the prisons themselves affected. Because the reality is the prison conditions in Azerbaijan have not gotten better in 2 decades for normal people, very normal people who commit an offense or who are faced with justice in a moment of poor judgment or in a moment of extreme poverty, couldn't do anything different. They're facing prison conditions that are not any better than 20 years ago, with ill treatment at its heart. We know this. It has never been reported as much as now, but now it's being reported. So imagine if your reporters would not be in prison, but could report about what is happening about in society overall. I would say in the last long decade of repression, three things really changed. One is the effective absence now of civil society and media workers, journalists who are independent in the country. That was not like that before. The strategy is nobody who could speak up freely should be able to do it anymore in the country, which is different from what was the case 10 years ago, for example. It would make the situation worse now than ever since the country joined the Council of Europe. And it links to the second trend, which is pushing people to leave the country, effectively pushing them so that they exile themselves. And now you have a broad community of civil society people, media workers, journalists living abroad. And why does the government do that? To feed their own narrative of saying these people have foreign interests, but they threaten them so that they leave. And this is kind of the broad strategy to eliminate independent voices. And when that doesn't work, which is also a new trend developed over the last 2, 3 years, when that doesn't work and isn't enough, comes in the transnational repression. So this internationalization of the repression through threatening people who are family members of those who have exiled themselves. We see this more and more through actual trials in absentia. Many of them now, there have been 22 individuals that were sentenced in absentia. So meaning they're not physically at the trial, right? They're abroad, but the trial still takes place. And third, actual threats and physical attacks on people, latest in date in Geneva with Emin Husseinov. There are two major differences. One is a total sense of impunity within the country. So the government is acting against any actor that speaks up freely and feels it's immune. And uh, they're actually confirmed by the second kind of trend that developed, which is the complete lack of action by the international community. No systematic, not even systematic, no kind of will to say, well, if you arrest this person, that is too much. And I really think a few months ago when Ali Karimli was arrested, I thought, now this is too much. I really thought, now if you arrest the kind of emblematic leader of the Azerbaijani opposition over the two last decades, maybe the third or fourth best known Azerbaijani abroad, then probably you're going too far. And not even that made a reaction. So really, impunity fed by lack of action. They're basically trading away principles, right? We in December 2025 we published a report that studied how the European Union changed its engagement with Azerbaijan, and little by little, the European Union favored trade over principles. And of course, we understand that the European Union has economic interests and promote its values, so it has to go kind of it's a weight game, right, between these two. But if you look at what the European Union agreed in a joint statement with Azerbaijan in March 2026, you see that it traded away principles. The statement does not mention values anymore. There's no word of democracy in it. There's no word of human rights in it. Quite the opposite. Actually, the statement takes over the language of the Azerbaijani government, which is respect for internal affairs, respect for sovereignty. Why do they do that? Why are they trading away their principles? Well, because they have oil, gas, and economic interests, very short term. We know that President Aliyev is a smart geopolitical player, and so he positioned himself in a very smart way in kind of threading a fine line with Putin, threading a fine line with the European Union. And Azerbaijan is now the big winner of this new geopolitical reality because so many European Union member states, the Czech Republic just this week, are basically trading away Putin's oil and gas for Aliyev's oil and gas. And in 10 years, they will be sitting with exactly the same problem as they had in 2022 with the dependence on the oil and gas of Putin, because everything indicates that the Azerbaijani regime is not on a path of liberalization, but in a path of brutalization. And that there's nothing change that indicates that would change. So these countries that are now favoring investments in oil and gas, favoring this trade, and saying this is our solution, are just putting themselves in exactly the same problem as they were with Russia in 2022. It is clear that you have a regime that doesn't want free and independent voices to express itself. You have a system, a political system that wants absolute control. Even with nominating the first lady first vice president. So you have a system in place of absolute control that should indicate to the international community that basically you have a partner that left the space of democratic governance and that is not taking a single step towards democratic governance. So then the international community should interrogate itself. Well, what do we do with this? But what the international community is doing, because I think the moment is actually more revealing about the Council of Europe and the European Union than it is about Azerbaijan. What President Aliyev is doing, we knew that would come. But what it is revealing about the international community is the tolerance for this. And so they're accepting a new lowest common denominator. I think the major mistake that is ongoing and that we will be suffering from in the decade to come is this replacement of oil and gas from Putin with oil and gas from Aliyev. The oil and gas smells the same. It actually is the same. We know that Azerbaijan has been importing from Russia, exporting to Europe. This is something that it's a major mistake. And yes, it's complicated because it would require that European countries move out of oil and gas for their energy resources. Obviously complicated. Nobody says it's easy. But the satisfaction with which the European Union and some of its member states are replacing the Russian oil and gas with so-called Azerbaijani oil and gas, that satisfaction is really a major mistake. The second thing is a tolerance. You know, not so long ago, it would have been inconceivable that somebody who receives the highest award of the Council of Europe, that is recognized by the Council of Europe as a partner, when arrested, would give way to zero reaction by the Council of Europe. And we have, in the case of Azerbaijan, we have two people who are quite exceptional from that perspective. Intigam Aliyev, today still the lawyer who represented the most client any lawyer has ever represented at the European Court of Human Rights. When he was arrested, the Council of Europe mobilized. The Council of Europe said, this one, no. And yes, it took 3 years to get him out of prison, but he got out. And it was pressure from multiple points, including the Secretary General of the Council of Europe, taking the individual case seriously and personally. And then you have somebody like Anar Mammadli, also rewarded by the Council of Europe, also, in relationship with the Council of Europe for many years, being arrested for the second time on the same charges he has already been arrested on which the European Court has already found that they were politically motivated, has already dismissed them in the past. So you bring the same charges back, and the Council of Europe is completely silent. And this is not only a shift, I really think it's a fault line to what people who embody the values of the Council of Europe expect from the Council of Europe. And I really fear, overall, broader than Azerbaijan, that something is developing with the organizations and the people that we work with, that is that those who should the most believe in the Council of Europe, in the Convention, on the European Convention on Human Rights, are those who are now the most disappointed by it. And this really worries me, because if human rights defenders and lawyers don't believe in this system anymore, who will? Who will be there for this system? And the system will be nothing if its cornerstones fall away. What the European Union can do immediately is set a sort of catalog of conditions for further engagement. The European Union will say, but Azerbaijan doesn't want to engage with us. We need them more than they need us. That remains to be proven. Oil and gas exports of Azerbaijan go to the European Union at, 95% of its oil and gas. So whom else should they export to? In the foreseeable future, it will be the European Union. And so there is leverage. And this conditionality, I'm not saying, because you're asking me immediately what to do, I'm not saying absolutely benchmarks that cannot be reached. You can find benchmarks that can be reached and that offer a path forward. A benchmark that can be reached is, for example, to say, well, we want you to allow international organizations back into the country. That is not an impossible benchmark, but and I'm not going to give you all of them because I also want to be able to continue having a margin of negotiations when we meet with the European Union. But to say there are benchmarks that can be listed, that should be listed, and that can be a way forward. And from that perspective, the European Parliament has done its job because it has actually done this in its resolutions. Then when I shift to the Council of Europe, there it's even easier because the Council of Europe is not a body that is supposed to do geopolitics. The Council of Europe's foundations, the Council of Europe's raison d'etre is the European Convention on Human Rights. It doesn't have another mandate. That's its mandate. And when the breach of the convention is such that the very application of the convention is a threat in a member state, then there is a tool called Article 52, which is a tool made available for the Secretary General to say, you are going too far. Why? Because the Secretary General is the guardian of this constitution, of this conventional framework that was created with the Council of Europe. So when you go too far, you have the imminent body of the Council of Europe, the Secretary General's office that will investigate you. I know this will not change the face of the things in the country. I know that it won't release people. I know that it won't end torture. I know all of this, but it will document it, and it will document it at the highest possible level. And no country wants that. And I just wonder, why are you not doing that? Why is it not happening? And why is it that we're spending more time being told we don't have the tools than any time is being spent on trying to use the tools? None of this is easy. Nobody is saying it's easy, and I'm not giving a lesson, a lecture to anybody. I'm saying, let's try these tools. And if it then still doesn't work, well, then we know really we this government doesn't want to go in any European direction. But right now, Europe, European Union and Council of Europe are not even trying to use these tools. The RSF index just confirms the sliding that Azerbaijan is doing in all of these democracy related indexes, right? But the big difference is in the RSF index, Azerbaijan is now the last European country by a mile, by far. There is not probably out there a human rights related NGO global that is as trusted as RSF. There is not probably out there more important to the cohesion of society, more important job than media workers and journalists. What more do you need, dear Council of Europe leadership, to act? How many more indexes will we see sliding? And when I see the loss, I think, of 15 points of Azerbaijan between the index of RFF of last year and this year, I think of the Absas media journalists, because that's why the index is sliding, because people have been arrested, sentenced, and are now in prisons in horrific conditions while being beaten, threatened to be raped, and not having access to healthcare. That's why. The index is just one thing, the reality behind it. A decade ago, I spent some time in the summer in Azerbaijan and was able to observe a few of the hearings of Anar Mammadli in court. I wrote about it. I called it Benny Hill courtroom, with a judge sleeping, another one on the phone, the lawyer not allowed to speak up, the accused behind a cage, and so on and so forth. And I thought that to mark the 2 years of the detention of Anar Mammadli, I wanted to go back and observe his hearing on 27th of April. And to access the country, well, one needs a visa. So I applied for a visa and I stated the aim of my visit, which is exactly the same aim as in summer 2014. I don't suffer at all in this, obviously, but it shows the increase of repression and it shows the lack of tolerance of any dissenting voice. And last point, it really shows how many of our friends and colleagues who are now in prison have only themselves out of solidarity. Because when I saw Anar Mammadli out of prison in 2016, one thing he said is, I saw you in the courtroom and it did me good. Now they don't see anybody in the courtroom. They see maybe a few internationals, but they don't see familiar faces that they know, that reconfort them, and that by looking at them, tell them, we're there with you. And so what is left for all of us is to send letters, send postcards, show them we're there with you, and share the stories that come out from your journalists, because these are the stories of real life, of real people in a real prison facing real repression.